Millions of people wake up believing they have another day ahead of them. They make plans. They go to work. They buy groceries. They make phone calls. They laugh. They complain. They postpone things they want to do. And then they go to sleep, expecting tomorrow to come. But sometimes, tomorrow never comes. This is the story of David. And on this particular morning, David had no idea that he was living his last day. It was an ordinary morning. Nothing about it looked different from any other morning. The sun rose. The streets slowly filled with people. Cars began moving through the city. Shopkeepers opened their doors. Children made their way to school. And somewhere inside a quiet apartment, David was still asleep. His alarm rang, and David opened his eyes. He looked at the clock. It was 7:14. He sighed and said, 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes.
He had said that many times before. And like most people, David believed that 5 more minutes could never change his life. He was wrong. David got out of bed, prepared himself for the day, and made himself a cup of coffee. His life wasn't extraordinary. He wasn't famous. He wasn't wealthy. He wasn't changing the world. He was simply living. And perhaps that is what made his story so ordinary. Because death doesn't only come for extraordinary people. It comes for ordinary people too. People who still have plans. People who still have unanswered messages. People who still have things they want to say. David checked his phone. There was a message from his mother. He smiled and replied, "I haven't forgotten." His mother had reminded him to call her that evening. There was nothing unusual about the conversation. No goodbye, no warning, no feeling that this would be their last conversation. Just a simple promise. "I'll call you tonight." Sometimes, the last promises we make sound exactly like every other promise. David picked up his keys and left his apartment. He locked the door behind him. Then he paused for a moment and looked back inside. It was just an ordinary home, a cup on the table, a jacket hanging by the door, an unopened letter waiting to be read. Nothing seemed important. Yet those ordinary things would soon become the things someone would remember most. David closed the door and walked away. The city was alive. People were rushing to work. Others were running late. Some were arguing. Some were laughing. Some were thinking about bills. Others were thinking about dinner. Every person David passed was carrying a story of their own, and none of them knew that David's story was about to change. He drove through the city. He listened to music. He thought about nothing in particular. Just another day. Just another journey. Or so he thought. Later that afternoon, David stopped at a supermarket to buy a few things. Bread, coffee, a few groceries. Nothing important, nothing memorable. At least, that's what he thought. He pushed his trolley through the aisles. He looked at prices. He picked something from a shelf. He put it back. He continued shopping. And then he met her. Her name was Maya. David didn't know that. And Maya didn't know his name either. To both of them, the other was simply a stranger. Two people who happened to be in the same supermarket at the same time. Two lives crossing for only a few seconds. Maya walked down one aisle. David came from the other direction. Neither of them was looking for the other. Their shopping carts almost collided. David stopped and said, "Sorry." Maya smiled and replied, "No, that's my fault." They smiled at each other, and that was it. Maya continued walking. David continued shopping. Neither of them looked back. Neither of them asked for a name. Neither of them knew that those few seconds would become the most important moment of the day. Because sometimes, the most important people we ever meet begin as complete strangers. David continued through the supermarket. He reached another aisle. Then something happened. At first, it was only discomfort, a strange pressure in his chest. He placed his hand against it. He took a breath, then another.
Something wasn't right. He tried to convince himself that it was nothing. Maybe exhaustion, maybe stress, maybe something he had eaten. He took another step. His vision began to blur. The sounds around him became distant. People were still talking. Trolleys were still moving. Music was still playing through the supermarket speakers. But to David, everything seemed far away. He reached for his trolley, and then his legs gave way. David fell. The trolley rolled away. A bottle hit the floor. People turned. For a moment, the ordinary supermarket became a place of panic. Someone shouted, "Call an ambulance." Another person replied, "I've already called." People gathered around him. Someone knelt beside him. Someone else tried to keep the crowd away. And somewhere in that confusion, Maya heard the commotion. She turned. She looked toward the crowd.
And then she saw him, the man whose cart had almost touched hers only minutes earlier. David opened his eyes. His vision was fading. But for one brief moment, he saw Maya standing at the end of the aisle, looking at him. Their eyes met. Neither knew why. Neither knew what it meant. And neither would ever get the chance to find out. The ambulance arrived. The emergency team rushed David inside. The supermarket slowly returned to normal. People went back to their shopping. Some talked about what had happened. Some wondered if he would survive. And some simply walked away. Because life has a strange way of continuing, even when someone else's life has stopped. At the hospital, doctors fought to keep David alive. Machines surrounded him. Nurses moved quickly. Instructions were shouted. Every second mattered. David's heart was failing. The doctors tried. They did everything they could. But sometimes, doing everything you can is still not enough. David's eyes opened one final time. The room was blurred. The voices around him sounded distant. He couldn't understand everything they were saying. But somewhere in his fading thoughts, he remembered his mother. He remembered the message. "I'll call you tonight." He remembered his apartment, his coffee, his morning, and perhaps most strangely, he remembered the woman in the supermarket, the stranger whose name he never learned. Then everything became quiet. David died. That evening, David's mother was waiting for his call. She looked at her phone. Nothing. She waited. Still nothing. Then the phone rang. But it wasn't David. It was the hospital. She answered and said, "Hello?" There are moments when a person's life changes without warning. A moment before, everything is normal. A moment later, nothing is. David's mother listened. She didn't say much. She simply sat there, holding the phone. And the promise David had made that morning, "I'll call you tonight," would never be fulfilled. Meanwhile, Maya was leaving the supermarket. She carried her groceries to her car. She checked her phone. She looked toward the supermarket entrance. For some reason, she stopped. She didn't know why. Perhaps she was thinking about the man she had seen collapse. Perhaps she wondered whether he had survived. Perhaps it was simply curiosity. But she didn't know his name. She didn't know where he lived. She didn't know who he was. And she certainly didn't know that he had died. Maya got into her car and drove away. That night, David's hospital bed was empty. His apartment was empty too. His coffee cup was still there. His jacket was still hanging by the door. The unopened letter was still waiting on the table. Everything remained except David. And that is one of the cruelest things about death. The world doesn't stop. The sun still rises. Traffic still moves. People still go shopping. Phones still ring. Dinner is still prepared. Tomorrow still comes. Only one person doesn't. David had lived 34 years. He had dreams he never completed, words he never said, places he never visited, people he never met, and a future he believed was waiting for him. But his future had disappeared in an ordinary supermarket aisle. A few seconds after crossing paths with a stranger, his life had ended. And Maya, she continued living, completely unaware that the man she had smiled at that afternoon was already gone. 2 strangers, 1 brief encounter, 1 life ended. And neither of them knew that this was only the beginning. Because sometimes death is not the end of the story. Sometimes it's where the story begins.